y'all ready to head off the trails? I'm the Cryptid Huntress, Jessica Jones, and I'm ready to take you on a legendary journey right now. We welcome you to Off the Trails here on Spaced Out Radio's YouTube channel. If you haven't hit subscribe yet, please do. We would really appreciate it. Follow us on Twitter and TikTok at Spaced Out Radio, Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show. Don't forget that show. You can find me, the Cryptid Huntress, at thecryptidhuntress.com. Subscribe to my YouTube channel, The Cryptid Huntress, and visit my shop, War Woman Goods. It is on my website and on Etsy. Thank you to Bumblefoot for that amazing intro music. That is much appreciated. You guys, I have a great show for y'all tonight. I have Tanya Braddock here. And before I pull Tanya up, don't forget that right after the show, the weekend crew is going to be ready to go on after hours, so tune in, all right? Let's get to our guest. Tanya Braddock is an intuitive empath specialized in quantum healing hypnosis, EFT tapping, and the emotion code, where she deep dives into the subconscious mind to assist and teach people how to tap into their own inner healer naturally and intuitively. She hosts the Existential Empath Podcast, where she shares tips and techniques on how to strengthen one's intuitive gifts to allow major shifts in consciousness to take place. Tanya worked in healthcare for nearly 15 years, where she experienced many paranormal experiences, which opened her up to understanding her abilities on a much deeper level. She is also a Sasquatch and ET experiencer and has participated in several CE5 events in Washington and North Idaho. Tanya also has the ability to activate people in their own knowledge of light language to assist with elevating one's consciousness. Also, you might have seen Tanya on my remote viewing investigation shows on Friday night. She has been there to remote view with me on 2 different cases, and Tanya has become a friend of mine, and I am so excited that she's here tonight. So I'm going to bring up Tanya Braddock tonight.
Hi, everybody.
Hey, Tanya.
Hi.
Long time no see, friend. I tell
Exactly.
you, it was just Friday night.
Stranger.
Absolutely. You actually came on and helped me to remote view Mel's hole.
Sure did.
That was actually a pretty fun show. That had to have been one of the most strange things I've ever remote viewed.
I would have to agree with that.
Yeah.
I felt that was very unique, and we both had similar data as well as different data, so that was very interesting too.
We did. It's really a great thing to be able to have someone else remote view with me on a target, because we see it from different angles, and I was actually seeing kind of a more sinister side, and you were seeing the more high vibrational side. And we put our data together, and we really had a great view of Mel's hole.
We sure did.
So yeah, well,
I like Mel's well better. I heard someone call it Mel's well.
We probably should have called it that. Actually, we wouldn't have cracked up as much probably had we called it that. Yeah. Well, Tanya, you have such an extensive background in healing and quantum healing and working in the healthcare industry, and I am just fascinated with how you got into the paranormal and the supernatural. So tell me a little bit about kind of how you got interested in the supernatural.
Me too. That's pretty funny. So, back in 2010 is when I started going through my awakening experience, when I started to recognize that I was seeing things that weren't necessarily, normal in my reality. Working in healthcare, I was seeing a lot of shadow beings and orbs and different lights in the hospital. And working with death and loss, I was around a lot of people who were crossing over. So I was witnessing mists and a lot of different, very strange paranormal activity. Well, fast forward to roughly 2018, 2019 is when I decided to move across the country from Florida all the way out to the Pacific Northwest. And I was just really strongly being guided. I didn't really know why, and I was the one in Florida who would always drag my friends to all the paranormal places. There was a little spiritualist camp there called Casadega that I would visit often. I would drag them to skunk ape stuff and ghost tours in St. Augustine and Savannah. I was the one who kind of coordinated a lot of those events. So I was always really interested and intrigued in that. But when I moved out to the Pacific Northwest, it literally leveled itself up for me. It was a whole new, a whole new game than what I was playing in Florida. And so, when I first moved out here in roughly May of 2020 is when I started to do CE5, or Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, which is, for those of you who don't know, it's Stephen Greer's protocol to meditate. And then you kind of act like a GPS system to call in extraterrestrial craft. And I was very new to this and I didn't know what it was. I was just fascinated. So I started to join some groups where people were doing this. And lo and behold, we were seeing a lot of phenomenon, UAPs, UFOs, all this fun stuff. And so I was really getting into the ET stuff, and at this point, Sasquatch wasn't even on my radar. I mean, he sort of was a little bit. I always liked Bigfoot and I was into the skunk ape stuff in Florida, but not to the extent that I was until I moved out here to the Pacific Northwest. And then so, in June 2020, I was invited to a Sasquatch event here in North Washington, up in Kettle Falls, Washington. And this was fascinating to me because I didn't really understand the idealism behind Sasquatch to the point of the spiritualism aspect of it. And at this particular event, it really opened my eyes to this whole other world, and at this event we were having experiences like gifting and boulders being thrown behind us. And it was crazy. And there was a video that you had commented on that you had actually seen me on before you had met me. And on that video, we were hearing huge boulders cracking behind us. And this was a ravine, so when we were filming that, it was for a documentary that they were filming. And somehow I got nabbed into it and they grabbed me and were like, here, share your CE5 experience.
Yeah, that's how I actually, before I ever knew who you were, I saw that some random person on Facebook sent me that video and I saw it and I thought, man, I would love to have that woman on my show sometime. And I mean, wasn't maybe 2 weeks later, you and I were friends on Facebook and you contacted me and I thought, oh my gosh, this is like serendipity here. Totally. And you and I have connected ever since. And, it's been a lot of fun, Tanya.
It has awesome. Been. And I think it's funny that you found that video because I hadn't even really seen the video. I didn't even know that it was out there. I just knew that I recorded it. And so that night I camped there. Actually, my friend invited me, but he couldn't come to the next evening. So I went and camped by myself there that first night with people I had never met before. And we were having around my tent. And now this is a campground in Kettle Falls, Washington, right on Lake Roosevelt, which is a high Sasquatch activity area. I was just watching a documentary that just came out in this area about Sasquatch. And so, there's a lot of phenomenon in this area, this northern Washington area. So that night I was hearing large footsteps outside of my tent and smells. Oh my gosh, these god awful smells kept rolling through the camp. And I could hear people in their tents giggling because we could all smell it. Like it was just this nasty stench. And we were seeing orb activity. You might even have a photo there, but we were playing sound bowls and tuning forks and just jamming, having a good jam session. And it was just, and a lot of people say that's backspatter. I promise you it was not. We were seeing orbs with our eyes. Some people have those on video too. They were just buzzing around the site, tons of them, all different colors. And the frequency of this event was just amazing. And so when I first got there, so I'm going there by myself, blind. I don't really know what to expect. And I'm pulling into this deep wooded area. And, I get there a day after it had started. So I pull in and I don't know a soul here. And everyone seems to be gathered around. So they're gathered around this tent. And I grab my little camping chair and I go and I sit down. And then everybody starts to clear away. And I immediately see this skull, this crystal skull. And I am mesmerized by it. I am like, what is that? And I'm getting goosebumps right now, just seeing that photo. That thing was staring at me. It was like it locked eyes with me. And I had seen the skull before. Well, lo and behold, I'd actually seen it on Ancient Aliens and I didn't even really recognize it at the time. So this skull is called the Mitchell-Hedges crystal skull. And there's a lot of speculation out there that it's not real, but I've got to say my story was very intense. So Bill is the guy's name who handles this skull. And I've actually asked him to come on my podcast. So I hope he can come on and share the story behind this skull, because I don't know much about it. I just know my experience. Well, he let us all connect with this skull. So we all stood in line, and he wouldn't let us touch it, but he said we could get up close to it and just connect with it one-on-one. Well, the moment I walked up to this skull, I heard in my head, "Welcome. It's good to see you again." And I was like, what? I kind of just, I took a step back and I started to get tears in my eyes. And I'm like, who just talked to me? Like, what was that? Then I kind of went into this little meditative state a little bit, and I started to see images in my mind's eye of me and others standing around this skull, which appeared to be Lemuria. Like, it was just this really wild experience in my mind. And from what I'm gathering is other people had a very similar experience as well, that many of us in past lives have worked with this skull, and this skull heals people. It activates people. And I've got to say, it activated me. And this was a catalyst for what I call Summer of Sasquatch and Friends 2020 edition, because it was event after event after event. And so at this little event, they were doing what was called light language activations. And I had never heard of this before, right? So star language. And what they would do is they get everybody in a circle. And there was probably 40 people there, I would guess, probably 40 people. And then they'd have a chair in the middle, and the one person would get in the middle, and that person would be activated in what they would call light language. And I was just fascinated by this, because everybody had a different language and everyone was crying or laughing. It was highly emotional.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Well, I probably waited till like number 38, because I was like, I don't know if I'm ready to get into this circle or not, So I get in there.
Your ego is like too much sometimes. And that's been my blockage with the light language. But, I'm not going to, you did give me some tips on how to activate my light language, and it worked. Okay. And I'm not going to say I'm going to do it here live on the air tonight, but I'm just saying it did work, Tanya. So proceed with your story. I'm sorry. I just had to put that in there.
And so this was all new to me, this whole Sasquatch light language skull action, I was just, and at this point, my friend isn't even there. I'm like, where the heck's my friend? So I get into the circle, and I don't activate my speaking language. I activate light sign language. I'm drawing shapes and sacred geometry with my hands, and everybody's just watching me. And the activator, the head guy, was like, "You're doing cosmic sign language." And I'm like, what the heck is that? I had no clue what any of this was. So, as it goes on later on, they're doing a documentary. And so there's a guy there, and I'm sharing my CE5 experience and how I just did cosmic sign language and blah. He goes, "You want to be in my documentary?" I'm like, what? So that's the video that you saw, was a portion of that documentary that they had actually put together. So at this point, I wasn't speaking anything. I had just done some weird, it was almost like something took over my hands. Like it just was fluid and moving. And I was doing all of these different movements and literally felt like I was drawing out different symbols, is what it felt like.
Now, do you think that, a lot of times when you practice something over and over and over again, like in martial arts, in self-defense courses and things like that, and even learning how to shoot a gun or ride a bike, It comes so natural. It's like muscle memory. Do you think that perhaps that could be from lifetime after lifetime after lifetime of doing that?
And that's a good question, Jessica, because honestly, I don't know, but I will say I do it so much in my sessions now, and I activate others, that I'm at the grocery store speaking light language and I have to catch myself. It's like, it's almost like if you knew Spanish, English, all these different languages, and you catch yourself speaking, a conglomeration of all of them. And and I've gotten involved in a lot of these different light language groups. And so it's just very interesting. So, there was that event, and then fast forward to the following month. Okay. So the next month, my friends are like, "Hey, let's all meet out in Western Washington." And I think you have a map. I think you've got a map of everything.
I do.
So that people can have an idea of where everything is located. Okay, so at the top there's Kettle Falls. That's where we had the Sasquatch retreat. And as you go down, you see there Mel's Hole, which is in Ellensburg. And then there's the Yakima reservation just south of that. You see that with the square around it. And then there's Mount Adams. So I'm heading over to Mount Adams. My friend has some property over there. And so we get our little CE5 group together, and I'm heading over to Mount Adams, and I'm following my friends. We're leaving from Spokane, and I'm following my friends in a separate vehicle. And somehow I lose track of them. I lose them, and I get off on a separate route. And I start going south. So they're headed, towards Mount Adams, and I'm going south. And I didn't really realize that I was lost until they called me and they're like, we don't see you behind us anymore. And I'm like, oh my goodness, like, where the heck am I? So I thought this was the route. And they're like, no, that's going to take you maybe an extra 30 minutes. And I'm like, oh, well, I guess I'm just going to keep going this way and I'll meet you guys there. Right. So I start heading through, and then the next thing I know, I'm in this extremely desolate area. There's no one's around. I have no cell phone reception. And then I recognize that I'm in Yakima reservation. So for those of you that are not familiar with Yakima, it is a highly, highly paranormal area. Lots of Bigfoot activity, lots of extraterrestrial UFO activity in the area. And the Yakima Indians actually have connections and contacts with these beings. Okay. So I'm in this extremely desolate area, not a car in sight. And for some reason, I am strongly guided to pull my car over to the side of the road and get out of it. And I'm like, where's this going? And I couldn't stop myself.
I'm sensing some sort of abduction stories next.
Tell me about it. Or David Politis or some crazy nonsense, So I get out of my car and I step around, and I had flip-flops on, and I get into I literally walk like maybe 10 feet into the field where this field is. And I slip my flip-flops off, and I'm standing there with my bare feet on the ground. And I'm like, what am I doing? Like, it just was like, almost like the light language on my hands had been taken over. Now my body's kind of like just moving.
Wow.
Well, Jessica, I fell into a trance, and I started speaking some sort of native tongue that I had never heard. And it was just very interesting. It kind of reminds me of what Fred talks about. What does he call it? The Yupik language. It's the Eskimo language. And it was very throaty, like, it was like this really deep throated kind of talk. And I'm just standing there, and I am pouring my eyes, just sobbing and sobbing and sobbing. And I'm speaking some language. And then I come out of this, and I'm literally hearing, thank you for clearing the land. And I'm like,
oh my gosh.
What? And I'm just like, I just came out here to see some ETs. Like, what, what's happening right now? So wow. I have this crazy encounter. And so in Yakima, they call the Sasquatch Sti-yi-ha-ma, okay? Which means stick shower Indians. Sti meaning spirit, yi meaning hiding, and then ha meaning cover of woods. Okay, so this is what they call them in Yakima. And so I didn't know what I was speaking. I had no idea what was going on. I was sobbing. So I get back into my car, and I'm like, I got to go see my friends. Like, what the heck's going on? Well, my GPS wasn't working because I'm in the middle of nowhere. So I just keep going straight, right? Yeah. I keep straight. I drive kind of like, I don't even know where I was, but eventually I end up at the cabin, where we had all rented. And my friends are like, dude, where are you? Where have you been? Where have you been?
Yeah. That had been scary.
Well, I was like, I've only been gone for maybe 30 minutes. I'm thinking I was gone for 30 minutes. They're like, you've been gone for almost 4 hours. And I'm like, 4 hours? What are you talking about?
Missing time.
For sure. Yeah. Lots of time for sure.
Well, so you were actually guided there. Like you were
totally.
You were totally sent there.
I went off the trail.
You went off the trails. That's right. This is the show. This is the place to talk about it. We are off the trails tonight, Tanya.
That's a great question, Tex. I do not know the difference between light language and tongues. Honestly, they could be the same. I don't know the difference between light language, star language, cosmic language. I just know what flows through me, and it doesn't feel demonic. It doesn't feel scary. It feels very high frequency, very uplifting, and almost like it clears emotions like in a very strange way. When you speak it, it just releases some dense energy. So that's a good question, Tex. I don't know. We'll have to look more into that.
It's a vibe. I think that Bigfoot Michigan Rob could use some light language right now. He's stuck at an airport, by the way, after the Alabama Bigfoot conference, thanks to Tex and his Bigfoot that he gave Rob yesterday.
Yeah, way to go, Tex.
He got stuck in customs or something. I don't know. They wouldn't let him through with that Patterson cast of a foot. So he's been stuck at the airport all day.
So
Shout out to Bigfoot Michigan Rob, everybody.
Shout out to you, Rob.
Yeah.
Okay. Hope you make it home safely with your foot intact.
We do too. Big shout out to Bigfoot Michigan Rob tonight. We're sending light, love, and light your way tonight, right, Tanya?
Totally.
Right.
So okay, so that was crazy. So I'm thinking that was a crazy experience. I lost time. I get there. So we get to the ranch and it's almost dark at this point. So we're like, geez, we might as well skywatch and stuff. Well, I meet this woman at this location and she just starts talking English and I can hear in the back of her throat like a tone. I hear like this beep in the back of her throat. And I'm looking at my friends like, do you guys hear this in her voice? And they're like, you're crazy. What are you talking about? You know, I think I was picking up on some sort of frequency. Well, I pull her aside and I'm like, okay, I hear a tone in your voice. She goes, oh, you're in resonant tuned with my light language frequency. And I'm like, what are you talking about? You know? Yeah. And so I explained my whole situation with her and she says, you were blessed by the guardians of the land. And I'm like, well, who the heck are the guardians of the land? She's like, Sasquatch. And I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. You know,
this is where it's coming full circle. Right?
Totally. This is where Sasquatch enters my life. Okay. So
spiritual Sasquatch.
Woo, yeah. So I'm thinking, oh, I'm going to see some ships. Yeah, right. Sasquatch had a completely other scenario for me, which is similar to Barry Littleton's story. He started to kind of have these things happen a few days prior to visiting this location as well. So, so we're out sky watching and I just out of the blue just set an intention that I wanted to have a good positive experience with Sasquatch. If that was meant for me to have, then I wanted to have a good positive, happy experience. Well, be careful what you wish for because that's kind of what happens, right?
Right.
So I go to bed. We go to bed that night. So we stay in a cabin where my friends who are married are up on the top in a, kind of like a bunk kind of area. And I'm down on the bottom by myself. Well, I start to drift off to sleep and I get into a very deep lucid sleep. Okay. And I literally start kicking and thrashing in my bed. Like I am just like, like losing it in my bed. And I am having one of the most vivid dreams I have ever had in my life. And what was happening is that there was a Sasquatch that was holding me in the air. If you can visualize the Lion King with the the baboon
Simba
holding the baby lion over.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, that's Sasquatch. I look like a toddler. Okay. In this dream, I looked like a toddler and I'm thrashing because I'm so excited because my friends are in front of me walking with their backs to me and I'm trying to get their attention to turn around and I'm screaming, Sasquatch is holding me. I am just going bonkers in this dream. Well, my friends wake me up. They're like, what are you doing? You're in your bed screaming Sasquatch and you're kicking and thrashing. And I'm like, you guys, I just had the most vivid dream I've ever had in my life. Like I'm just losing it. It's like 2 a.m. and I had so much adrenaline running through my body. I just couldn't get back to sleep, So
this is all in the 5D. This is all 5D communication.
Totally.
Yeah.
And it was
super awesome.
It was so real and so vivid. I mean, and that Sasquatch was almost giggling. It was like, it was having a fun time I was having an experience, but my friends couldn't visualize it. And I was so frustrated. I wanted them to just turn around and see all this,
I know. Sometimes we feel like we might sound like we're crazy when we tell people.
It sounds like we're crazy. And I know that my story is definitely off the trails because it's a lot different than Fred from Alaska. I hear you, Fred. If you're listening, I've watched every show of yours and you just put a new one out. I'm going to watch
Fred in Alaska. We love Fred in Alaska. He's been our guest here.
Give him a shout out because he's got a different type of being going on there for
big
sure.
Shout out to Fred Roll in Alaska. We love your YouTube channel, Fred.
Love his YouTube.
Tanya's a big fan. So am I.
After this vivid dream, I finally start to fall back asleep. All right. It had to have been like 1:32 a.m. when I had all this action going on. So I finally fall back asleep. And then I wake up at 3:33 in the morning. I'm like, I look at my
Angel number.
clock, I look at my phone. I'm like, oh, it's 3:33. I'm hearing in my voice or in my head, I need to go out into the field. And I'm like, dude, it's 3:30 in the morning. It's dark and it's in the middle of Washington State. I don't want to go out into the field by myself. I'm kind of freaked out by this. Well, so I get all my clothes on and I head out into this field. Okay. And they call it the Field of Dreams. So I head out into this field and I see an orange orb and I'm like, ooh, it's like a little kid just following this little orb. Okay. And I get all the way to the back of this property and there's a bench. There's a bench way back there and it is pitch black. I didn't even have a flashlight. I don't even know how the heck I got back there. I just intuitively followed it all the way back there.
Tanya, that's dangerous, by the way. It's dangerous.
It's what?
It's very dangerous.
Tell me
to go out by yourself.
I'm missing 411. I mean, come on, like twice. I mean,
Portals.
Yeah, come on, it's a miracle I'm not missing 411 at this point. But it's like this just been this crazy story. So, I'm hearing in my mind these telethoughts and this mind speak and kind of this chanting going on. And so I'm heading out into this field and I sit on this bench and I feel this tremendous presence around me. I mean, and I'm looking around and I don't see anything, but my clairsentience was like my spidey senses were going off the Richter. I was just like, something is here with me. Something is here with me. And immediately I feel these hands. Oh God, I'm getting chills right now. I'm probably going to tear up because it was so emotional. I feel these hands come on my shoulders and they are huge, Jessica. I mean, it's like the fingers are down to my hips and then the thumb is all the way back on my, on the back of my hips.
Okay.
And I am feeling this tremendous. And I slumped. I was like, like this feeling. And I just, tears pouring down my face, pouring. I couldn't stop. I was like weeping, sobbing. Yeah. And I'm hearing in my mind's eye, I'm hearing this telethought, let it go, let it all go. You are not here to hold the weight of the world. It is time for you to step on your divine path. And I'm getting emotional because it was so powerful. It was so powerful. And I know some of you are out there thinking, this is the craziest story. I mean, this encounter was the most powerful encounter. And I'm also seeing in my third eye, in my clairs, I'm seeing a female Sasquatch. And she is so comforting and so loving. And I am like, and I knew she was female because I could see breasts. I could see just this tenderness about her. And I am just sobbing. And it's like, I had my eyes closed at this point. So it was almost like I was in a theta state. I was in this kind of trance-like state, And so I'm feeling this. And then finally I snap out of this. I snap out of it and I open my eyes and it's bright. There's sun. And right in front of me, maybe 10 feet, is a deer, like a doe. And she is staring at me in my eyes. And then it was almost like she nodded at me. It was like she nodded and then she just galloped off. Now, I know there's stories of Sasquatch doing shape-shifting. I know Barry had a situation with a squirrel, So
I've heard many stories of that.
I don't know if that was the Sasquatch or not, but it was just crazy that I wake up. I'm out there in the dark. I wake up and there's a deer 10 feet in front of me, just eye to eye contact. And it was like, it just was almost like you see me and I see you. I can't even explain it. And so I'm sitting there for a minute stunned because I don't even really know what just happened to me. And then I hear behind me, Tanya, and I turn around and it's my friend, who is in the cabin with me. She's like, where have you been? And I'm like, she goes, I thought you went to the bathroom and then you never came back. And I'm like, I don't know. I was guided to come out here and I just had this really intense experience and I saw this deer and I had a Sasquatch in my head and I don't really know what happened. She's like, you've been gone for almost like 2.5, 3 hours. And I'm like, again?
A lot of times, Tanya, I in experiences with deer and animals like that, a lot of times it could be an ET screen memory as well. So
very true.
That could happen as well. And I know you.
How do we know they aren't working together? What if they're working together?
I think they are sometimes personally, but
I know I saw a Sasquatch in my mind's eye. So on my podcast, I talk a lot about tap into these. It's like your clairvoyance, clairsentience, clairaudience, that kind of stuff. So I was just learning how to really dive into this stuff. So, so that whole situation happened and I was like, whoa, that was really intense. So another month goes by and I have this tremendous sense of needing to travel to all these national parks. And I'm like, what is going on with me? This is during lockdown. This is when everybody's home during COVID. And I'm jumping in my car and I literally, no lie, I am driving from Crater Lake. Okay. So in Oregon, I go to Crater Lake, which is ominous in itself. I was there by myself. There wasn't a soul. Now talk about David Pilates. I mean, I'm like jumping around to all these national parks all by myself in my car with my little Sasquatch in the the driver's or the passenger seat, my little stuffed animal, Harry, And so I go to Crater Lake, Mount Shasta, Grand Tetons, Yellowstone Glacier. And then my friend invites me to the Alaska Triangle. And I'm like, what was that? And this was like the course of maybe 3 weeks, over 3 weeks.
It sounds like you were on a pilgrimage to heal the land. It was insane. It's your higher calling, perhaps.
It was. And I think that's what the Sasquatch meant when it's time for you to step into your path. So I started to meet people who were also doing this. And they told me that I'm what's called a grid worker. And I'm like, well, what's a grid worker? And they're like, well, you hold light codes. It's in your DNA. And I'm like, what? So this was all very new to me. So I am now starting to help people who are also grid workers, like learn this because I was kind of thrown into this. I didn't really understand, 1 minute I'm just chilling and acting normal. And the next minute I'm speaking languages and now I'm traveling all over these places. Now I go back to my 30s and I've been to over 50 countries. Because I just traveled the world in my 30s and I loved it. And many of the places I went were churches, which is very interesting. So I'm wondering if I was subconsciously doing grid work, at that time. And I just didn't even really recognize that I was doing that. So I
think you were.
It is important work. And the thing is at each of these locations, I started to speak a language. I'd get out of the car. One of them, I sat in Crater Lake. Okay. I was looking down in the Crater Lake. Now there's a lot of stories about Crater Lake, a lot of UFO activity, weird stuff going on there too. I sat right there on a ledge and just by myself and just viewed Crater Lake. And I started to speak a language and a chipmunk jumps right on my lap and just looks up at me. And I'm like, what is going on? Is that an ET? Is that Sasquatch? Like I'm starting to correlate at this point animals. And as a child, I always spoke to animals kind of telepathically, but I'd tell my friends at school and they'd say I was weird. So I think I shut it down, when I was a kid. So,
do you think it was that the frequency and the vibration, this world is all about energy, frequency, vibration. Do you think it's just on that vibe with you? And it's a communication. It's a means and a way of communication.
It is.
Yeah,
I think you're right with that.
It's
Jessica.
Literally universal, right? I mean, because when when your vibe attracts your tribe, okay.
Which
so I think that
animals at this point,
and it's totally animals and humans and everything else. And I think that's why a lot of times some people are more attuned to the paranormal and ET experiences and Bigfoot experiences because you're on that vibe and you're able to see things because you're on that frequency.
It's like a radio station. Yeah, it's literally tuning into a radio station. And I feel like it was just one thing after another, but I was having fun doing it. I was just, how you listen to rap and jam. I just had my music on and I'm like traveling and I was just having a good old time visiting all these beautiful parks. And I loved doing it during COVID because no one was there and I was totally away from everybody. And it was
no people. Right?
No people.
I love that.
And most people are like, that's scary that you're going to national parks by yourself. And my parents were terrified. Half the time I didn't tell them. I'm like, oh, I'm in California, whatever. But I was in Mount Shasta looking for portals. I did a video. I was like, what was I doing? But I was being guided, kind of to do this from a higher frequency. And I guess
you were protected
in that fear frequency. I probably could have been abducted or, whatever, but who knows? I wasn't abducted those 2 times I lost time.
That's true. But you know what? I feel like when you are on your path, your divine path, and I feel like you get extra protection. I feel like the angels, there's something that protects you a little more.
Sasquatch? I don't know.
Sasquatch, ETs, I'm not sure.
Yeah. Even when I go out on hikes now, I always ask for protection from Sasquatch because it's like if there's a grizzly bear, if there's a moose or, something, all this crazy stuff in the woods here. But So fast forward to October 2020, my mom, I go home to visit my parents. I drive from Idaho all the way to Western New York, which is also high paranormal activity. This whole area in Western New York, it's just wild. Well, my grandmother had passed away. So I went home to kind of say goodbye to her home and say, help my dad go through her thing. So I stayed in her very old 1800s farm style home by myself in the middle of nowhere. Okay. This is like darker than dark. I mean, out there. And I had no fear the whole time I was there. I was there by myself.
Was there electricity?
Yeah, there was electricity, but it is Amish area. So there's a lot of Amish boogies that kind of drive by,
Uh-huh.
So one night I'm woken up in the middle of the night and I look out the window and you can see stars. Oh my gosh, stars to the ground. I mean, it just was so intense. And I look up and I see a triangular ship and I'm like, oh, here we go. I was just like, here we go, And then the next night I had a visitation from what appeared to be a mantis type being. And I had never at this point had this type of visitation where I actually physically saw something. The funny thing, I was coming out of the bathroom. I just got done going to the bathroom and I come out and there's this being standing there and I wasn't scared. It was almost like I was like, hey, what's up? Like I knew who this being was, which was super even weirder in its sense that I even wasn't afraid, And so that experience happened and that was really intense and I wasn't scared. I had my dad joked because at first, Central Florida, that's where I went to college. Yay.
Yeah. Hey, I played them in rugby, actually.
That's awesome.
Yeah. We played them. They had all right rugby team.
Rugby.
Yeah.
So I had never really had these experiences. And the whole time my dad joked because before I got to my grandma's, there was no animals there. And by the time I left, it was like Snow White. And I was joking. I was like in the backyard going, just bringing in all the animals like Snow White.
Like Snow White. I was going to say, do you have like a little bird land on your hand?
Well, one night I woke up because I slept downstairs on the couch because I had to heat the place and I slept near a little space heater. So I didn't want to go all the way upstairs and have to heat the whole house, So I slept downstairs on the couch and it was right in front of a picture window. And one night I woke up to something smashing on the window and I woke up and there was a huge 6-point buck smashing on the window. And I'm like,
on the window.
Yeah. His horns were kind of like bumping up against like the sliding glass doors. And
he was trying to get to Snow White.
I think that, or was that Sasquatch again? I don't know, but I did see a couple of orange orbs in that area. She has some wooded areas around the house. And one night I did wake up and I saw some orange orb activity and I had taken some pictures of it. And my parents were like, whoa, like, what is that? Because there's nothing out there. I mean, it is pitch black, where he lives. And so it was just crazy. And so, yeah, light language, I can explain a little bit about that. I guess the way I explain it.
Before we move on to that, did your grandmother ever talk about having experiences out there on that property?
No, but I asked the neighbor. Okay, so the neighbor who lives far away. I said, do you ever see weird, strange things out in the field? He goes, all the time. The time. And I'm like, interesting. Now, my grandma was contacting me as well while I was there. I mean, I think she knew I was there. She was messing with my phone. She was waking me up at night I could smell her perfume like she had dumped it on my face. I mean, being an intuitive empath, I kind of pick up on a lot of the spirit activity around me, which is not necessarily new to me, but I'm learning how to discern, what is around me.
Yeah.
And so it's just been kind of wild. Yeah. And then, light language. I guess the way I explain it is, when you watch Star Wars and Han Solo talks to Jabba the Hutt, and then he talks to an Ewok, and then he talks to someone else, and he talks in all these different languages, right? So it's like all these different dialects. And from what I gather, it bypasses the brain. So it bypasses our conscious brain. And it's actually a language that comes from a feeling. It comes from the heart space. And when I speak it, my heart vibrates. Like I can just feel it right in there. And it will raise your frequency. And it also can access deep, deep wisdom inside of your subconscious mind. So I do a subconscious work with my clients. I get them into a deep theta state. I kind of guide them into that. And then we go in and we kind of tackle whatever it is that they want to tackle. So I've done things from healings to abductions to a whole variety of things, that if people have had Sasquatch or Dogman experiences and they don't remember it, and you can go in there in these theta brainwave, in these theta states, and tap into these memories and this information. And you can do past life regressions too. So it's like, that's the neat thing about quantum healing, is you can really dive deep, into those aspects and just figure out what it is that you want to reprogram,
Tanya. So back when I had a show on another network, I had my friend Joelle Biot come on my show, and we talked about light language versus Bigfoot language. And let me tell you, that was one of the most interesting shows I've ever done. I've done a lot of interesting shows. Okay. And it was wonderful because, we played the Ron Moorhead tapes, from back in the 1970s. And it's really interesting with the samurai speak. And I had just heard a similarity between the samurai speak and all the recordings that they made with light language. And I'm not saying I did not know, or I can't say that it has any connection at all, but Joelle was able to come on the show and kind of talk about light language. And he even did like a little healing kind of, I guess you call it a ceremony, kind of. At the very end of the show. And it was really awesome, because later down the road, recently on this network, I was able to interview Ron Moorhead, and we talked about it. Amazing. So it came full circle, and I love that. But I don't know if it has any connection at all. To me, it sounds kind of scary. It doesn't sound healing, listening to Bigfoots do samurai chatter. However, that doesn't mean that it's not the same to Bigfoot. And they combine so many different languages in their chatter. It's everything from archaic Japanese to Russian to German,
or even Egyptian language. Sometimes it can sound Egyptian,
Sumerian,
or Native American. Absolutely. Yeah. And when I work with clients, different dialects will come out, and it could be based off of their soul origin, their star origin, whatever it may be. I can't really question it. Because it bypasses the conscious mind. Your ego wants to say, I want to put a finger on what this is. But when I speak it, they're like, I feel that in every cell in my body. And I'm like, I've never heard of that language before. It just kind of came out of my mouth. And so I'm learning to allow that information to flow through me. And like I said, it's not demonic. It is not scary. It is not. It's very emotional, it's very emotional. So I personally believe, if we change our intentions around Sasquatch, from hunting Sasquatch to connecting with Sasquatch, I feel like we'll have a lot of different, experiences. At least that's been my experience. I didn't go out there to prove anything. I didn't go out there to hunt or, that. I just wanted a connection, and did I get a connection, and so
I feel that I love light language. And when I hear it, it is so soothing. Joelle, the same person who came on my show to talk about light language, he actually certified me in interdimensional Reiki. I have to tell you all about that one day. It's a whole show. I'll bring Joelle back on sometime, and we'll talk about it. I was certified in interdimensional Reiki, and it's just so healing, and it's beautiful. And Patrick Noble, thank you so much for that super chat. We really appreciate you,
Patrick.
You're the best. I appreciate you.
Good energy.
Yeah, good energy. We appreciate that. But yeah, I love the light language, Tanya, and and you are by nature a very healing soul. And I know that. I can just tell just by, I don't know. I just feel like you and I
so are you. I feel like we connect. And, one of your guests had talked about starseeds and whatnot. And I do. I resonate with that. I really do. I resonate with the Pleiadians and the Arcturians and whatnot. And this has all been kind of new for me. The last couple of years, I've just been navigating these waters. And I do feel like we experience things at our level of consciousness, right? So if we're in a state of fear, we will probably have experiences that are similar. But if we're going in from a state of love and in our heart, odds are we're going to have a different experience, So I think people will say, oh my gosh, it's really scary to have contact with ETs. And, do you have reptilians contact? And I'm like, no, actually, I've never, ever had that experience, but I also don't have fear around it either. But I also haven't had a fearful experience. There's many of my clients that have had abduction experience are terrifying, so I don't know if there's a reason why people get abducted versus others. I don't really know what the answer to that is. And I can really hold space for them because I feel for the fear and terror that they went through. But I can't speak from my own experience because that's not what I have had, in my life. So,
I've actually had a couple of experiences with ETs personally. And so, this weird thing was, it wasn't that scary to me. looking back on it, and when it happened, it was almost like, but of course I'm the cryptid huntress. I'm out in the woods chasing Bigfoot, and I've been doing that for the past many years. And so to me, it's just like, oh man, am I seeing that? That sucks. That's
well, and there's
weird.
even this concept. I follow in QHHT, you follow Dolores Cannon, and she talks a lot about how these ETs are actually different aspects of ourselves. So when we have a visitation, it's actually us that is visiting us, from a future standpoint. So I guess that's the rationale that I have, and what we believe we perceive, right? So
yeah.
I'm like, well, that's just me and a mantis being body. Okay, I got it. I'm okay with that. Okay.
Tanya, I've actually seen a mantis type ET before.
See, and that's fun. You and I have had a lot of similar experiences and correlations between things. So makes you wonder if we're from the same star origin,
I don't know. Here we are. I don't know. I'm sure we'll find out at some point.
I know.
Yeah.
But I do feel like all of this, we're being kind of pulled through this ascension awakening process to bring more joy and magic back into our lives. And I think just this exploration of cryptids and Sasquatch and ETs, it's just, I know for me, it's exciting. It's fun to get together with my team or my friends and go have these experiences. And I just met some new folks who do paranormal stuff, and they're like, you want to come? I'm like, yeah, I've got some areas, So
I mean, take every opportunity you get. I'm telling you, it'll change your life, right, Tanya?
No, I've never heard of the Lion Man. No,
I haven't either. Donna, I have not experienced the Lion Man. Not yet.
I mean,
I've got to look into that though.
Yeah, the only really experience I've had is with that Sasquatch experience and then the ET experience. And I've had a lot of experience with craft. I see, but I do the CE5 myself. I kind of sit out on my porch and I meditate, and I have reached out to a few folks to come on my podcast to talk a little bit more about CE5, and so people can understand it. And I am seeing it in mainstream a little bit. I told you today, Expedition Bigfoot, they were talking about CE5, and they were also talking about remote viewing. So that is quite interesting.
That's interesting. Well, my entire team is trained in remote viewing, and my Bigfoot field research team. Of course, we're into all the other paranormal aspects as well, but yeah, we're all trained in remote viewing. And I thought, I think that the head of my team was pretty cutting edge back then, when he decided to train all of us in remote viewing, because it really does add a whole other angle to what we're doing out there. And maybe other people are just catching up to that. I don't know.
It could be. And honestly, it's like, there's certain people who will think that my story is just made up in my head or whatnot. But the reality is I felt it in every cell of my body. And you can't really make that up. When I think too, we've got to learn to tap into our other senses. We've got to really tap into not just seeing with our eyes, but feeling it in our body. And I know I've seen that where people have had encounters and you feel it in every cell of your body, whether it's fear or elation or amazement or whatever it may be. I think we've got to tune into that a little bit more, get those spidey senses going a little bit more, and don't always rely on our physical eyes, because things in our life right now are an illusion. Just because we see it doesn't mean that it's actually happening. It's like, it's a feeling. And I'm sure Fred could probably relate to that. When he sees Hairy Man, he feels it in every cell of his body, it's like this overwhelming sense of fear or whoa, so I feel like we need to tap into all of our senses and have an understanding of what those more psychic senses are. And we all have them. It's just, we have to learn how to, just like a sport, right? We have to learn how to develop them.
Muscle memory. And that's the same with our psychic abilities and remote viewing. That's why I love remote viewing, and I do it all the time. And I even have a show where I do it. Okay. And it's all for fun. It's for entertainment purposes only. Okay. But it's a lot of fun. And I do it so much that, I get better at it every single time I do it. And what it is you don't get good at it until you practice. I mean, they say you don't start getting good until you've done at least 100 targets. Okay.
I agree.
And so, and it's just like riding a bike, or any kind of thing, like I said, martial arts. And it's just a matter of getting people excited about doing, being psychic and using their abilities and waking people up, totally. And it's baby steps, right? Sometimes, or sometimes it's taking, or you can just take off with it like a rocket, everybody's on a different level with it, but I love it, Tanya.
And I do feel too, if you're really good at something, odds are you've done it in several lives before that. So when I started doing remote viewing, my friend was like, how did you pick up on this so fast? I'm like, personally, I think I've done this before. Like this wasn't,
you're good at it.
My first rodeo in remote viewing. Now, for me, it was harder for me to learn the military aspect of it, the writing it down and this and that, because I have those intuitive abilities, but now it's like, okay, I understand that I'm picking up on things, but I also know that there's a process to remote viewing. And that's the part that I'm trying to learn, is the process, of that.
Yeah. Well, I was trained from the get-go in coordinate remote viewing. So that's kind of my jam. That's what I like to do. So it's easy for me, but I mean, there's all sorts of different types of remote viewing, and they're all legit, and they all get to the target. Okay. And that's what's important. So, and you're so good at it, Tanya. I've been impressed from the get-go with your skills.
It's fun. And I enjoy it. And Donna, you wake up and you feel it and you see it. So, and hearing too, that's your clairaudience. And I think for me, just having that telethought or that mind speak, and this happens to me with clients all the time. It's like I muscle test. So that's applied kinesiology, which is actually scientifically proven to work. But oftentimes it comes to me in my mind, in my telepathy quicker than it does when I'm muscle testing. It's almost like, boom, it's in there. And then I'll just muscle test to validate it, to make sure, is my thought on track?
How do you muscle test, Tanya? I know how to do it, but explain to everybody what muscle test is.
So basically it's a way to communicate with your subconscious mind. And the way I explain it, when I connect with people, it's like a Wi-Fi network. Okay. So I connect to their energy and they have to pick up the phone, right? So they have to give me permission to even muscle test their energy. So chiropractors use it. A lot of different, people use it, and you can do it physically on a person, or I do it energetically. I can do it from a distance. So it's literally like a Wi-Fi network. That's kind of how I explain it. But, you can use it for a variety of things. Now, you can't use it for, will I win the lottery, or should I, get this ticket, or, whatever. You can't use it for those things. But it's more for, like, you can hold a bottle of supplements and muscle tests and ask your body, your subconscious, will these benefit me? How many do I need? Or, whatnot. So a lot of my sessions, not my quantum healing sessions, but my emotion code and my EFT tapping sessions, I do the muscle testing on people, and we dive deep into the subconscious mind. And majority of the issues that we have as adults were stemmed before the age of 7, because that's when we're in our theta brainwave state. We're in those observatory years. We're learning about our environment. We're learning how our parents function in society. And, so that's where we pick up a lot of what we call subconscious programs. And so I kind of go in there and help, reboot, reprogram. It's all, the way I explain it is like, if you have a record player and it starts skipping, most people will pick up the needle and let it continue on the record. Well, what I'm doing is we're picking up the needle, pulling off that record and putting on a completely brand new record.
Wow. Now, do you do this through hypnosis, right? Is it regressive therapy?
Actually, no, this is different. So I have several sessions. I do the guided hypnosis sessions, but this is different. It's basically diving into the emotional body and releasing what are called unprocessed or trapped emotions in the physical body that are majority of the time caused because of some sort of an emotional trauma or something that could have happened in our early childhood, or even later than that. But 9 times out of 10, it's our early childhood that these things happen. Yeah. For example, I had this gal who couldn't get over sugar cravings. And so I muscle tested and we got down to it. She created a subconscious program. Every time she went to the dentist, she was in fear. And so they gave her a sucker. And so every time she got anxious, she ate sugar. And so she carried this from her childhood of going to the dentist, of being anxious and stressed out at the dentist. They would give her candy, which I think is funny. They give you candy at the dentist anyway, but she carried that.
Well, they'd be out of business if you didn't have cavities. Just saying.
Exactly. That's a really good point. I didn't remember think about that.
Yeah. They want you to have cavities. They make money. Just like with all of the, medical stuff that's going on,
So crazy.
Crazy, right? That is so crazy. Yeah. Tanya, we have about 2 minutes. We only have 2 minutes left. To wrap it all up, is there anything else? Like, I mean, we've talked about so much, but I have so much more to talk to you about.
I know there's
any
a lot.
Last words? Any last words or anything?
Gosh, I don't even know. I mean, you want me to see if any light language comes through? I don't even know.
I love that.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I just got to take a breath. And so I guess I just encourage the audience to kind of close your eyes and listen with your heart. Don't try to figure out what I'm saying. Don't try to, and I'll just kind of see what comes through. Koriana shirekiana hadoyana hakikiade. De girata hana koitiana de giretiana. Shoroto shiakana ha de girete kikiana. Kiriata shiraka hana ha hoyana ha kiere he ana hokoyana ha kihie. De giroto toyana ha ka hayana ha. Oh, I'm feeling like sweaty.
Yeah.
I just felt like sweaty and very vibrating.
I feel that. Yeah. I feel that. I
don't know
Tanya.
what just came out, but that's what came out. For those that want to hear light language, that's what happened.
That was beautiful. Tanya, where can people find you?
You can find me on my podcast, the Existential Empath Podcast, which is on most major platforms. You can also find me on my YouTube channel, but my podcast has a lot more content. And you can visit my website at the www.thesoulcafe.org. And I actually created a promotion code for those of you who would like a session with me, whether you're struggling with pain in your body, or maybe you're dealing with grief, or maybe you had an experience, an abduction, or you saw a Sasquatch or a dog man and you can't remember it and you want a little bit more clarity on that. Spaced Out 10 will give you 10% off. And or maybe you want to be activated in light language. Oftentimes that will happen in my sessions, and it's only based off of a frequency usually. So for those of you that just listened to that, some of you may be like, that's not like baby talk. That was kind of weird and crazy. It's all about a frequency. And so when it comes out for those who are in that frequency. Okay.
Yes. I felt it. I won't tell you.
I'm sweaty and got kind of shaky. So I don't know.
I love it. Oh my gosh, Tanya, thank you so much for joining me tonight. We really packed it in tonight, and I have so much more to talk to you about. I have goosebumps right now. I just love this. Thank you, Tanya, so much for being my guest tonight.
You're
I know
our
audience loved it, and we really appreciate you. Okay. And and thank you. It's any kind of emotional support or any kind of support is worth more than $1 million. I mean, thank you so much for offering that and your services to humanity. Okay. So thank you, Tanya. I will be seeing you soon. Okay. Thank you. You have a great week. Okay.
You do.
All right. Thanks, Tanya. All right, y'all. That was awesome. I hope y'all enjoyed that just as much as I did. Don't forget that right after this show, you can join the live crew on After Hours. They're going to take you on an incredible journey for the next 3 hours. Next Saturday on Off the Trails, my guest is Tex Wesson of Texas Front Porch, and we're going to be talking about Bigfoot, Dogman, and all things paranormal. I can't wait to see y'all there. But for now, I'm the Cryptid Huntress. I'm headed off the trails tonight, and I will see you guys next Saturday night. You guys have a good week.